All right, this is installment number 4 on graphics. We've been having such a good time. We made just a regular old GUI with just a piece of paper. Then we added some components here that was lit. We then added this image icon, or this image, which was fantastic. The problem is when we run this, all it's doing is using what is called the border layout. It's just, or not the border layout, the flow layout. Flow layout just tries to put it at the top. We're not able to place click me here, hello here, does this work? Can't place things in locations. So there are different layout managers that you can use. We are going to go through a couple basic ones right now, and then I'm going to show you just how to research it on your own, how to do the API, how to figure it all out. So different ways to arrange things on a GUI is what we're going to do. So the first thing we're going to do is set the layout of this the piece of paper. So here we are creating the piece of paper on line 22. We can do it after create the background color, it doesn't matter, but I'm going to do my panel dot set layout. Ooh, I don't know if it's set layout manager or set layout. It's set layout. So notice I just did a control plus in BlueJ, which is the autocomplete. I wasn't quite sure. I could go to the API and look at it, but I see right here there's a set layout method that accepts a layout manager. So I'm going to use this one, and then in place of this, I have to put a layout manager. So I'm going to do new grid layout. And I am now going to go look at the API to see what the constructor of the grid layout class looks like. So we'll run to the API, and we'll do a search for grid layout. There's a grid bag layout. Look at all these different layouts. You could look up layout managers and look for anything that inherits it as well, or Google search for layout managers, and you'll find a whole bunch of information. But we're going to look at the grid layout. We'll look at the constructor of the grid layout. There's one that accepts rows and columns. There's also one that accepts rows, columns. Horizontal gap and vertical gap are the spacing between those rows and columns. But we'll first start with this one and then maybe move to that one right there. So I'm going to try to use the grid layout. Oops, wrong one. I'm failing left and right here to get the right class. And I'm going to try to use the grid layout, and I'm going to put in a 3x3. I don't think I added 9 components, so that should be fine. I will set the layout. So what that does is now anything you add. So when I add this button, click me, it's going to go in the first cell. The second one will go in the second cell. So whatever order you add them in, they'll go into different cells. So this just made a 3x3 grid on the piece of paper, which means I now have 9 spots on the piece of paper that I can add things. Let's see what that looks like. So when we check it out, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Looks like it's only creating 1, 2, 3, 4. I said 9. Huh. Well, because we only added 5 things, it looks like it's adding in a vertical fashion of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We'll have to check out what order we added things in by doing this. Let's put them over here next to it. Put this up on top of it. So the first thing we added was click me, which is top left. The next thing we added was hello, which was next to it. The third thing we added was a JText field. But notice the JText field, it takes up the entire size of that screen. So I don't know why it actually did not let it go to a, you said 3x3, and it's only giving me 3 rows and 2 columns for some reason. And I don't know why. It's always making it a 2x3. That is extremely interesting. Don't know why on that. All right, well, this is just the grid layout. It takes up the entire size. Notice the button takes up the whole thing. You can change the dimensions of this. So if I change this to a 4 by 1 or something like that, let's see what happens here. If I do 4 by 1, and I compile it, and I run it, I just don't know why it's not going all the way off to the side. So I must be doing something wrong. Change this to 2 by 2 and see if that changes anything. All right, now we're getting an extra one. All right, it seems to be always adding one on me. So 2 made 3 and 3 made 2. I don't know. You're going to have to play with this one on your own because this is now a 2 by 3. And I just put 2 by 2 in. So I don't know why that is happening. You can also set the horizontal and vertical gap. So I can say 20 comma 100. Actually, it's probably going to be way too big. Let's go 50 and take a look at this. This should set the horizontal and vertical gap between them. So notice there's now some spacing between them. This is the horizontal gapping, and this is the vertical gap. I don't have buttons down here, so it's hard for you to see the actual component itself, but there is a vertical gap. So that's the grid layout, and I don't know why it's giving me the one extra one. So we're going to have to look into that, come back to you on that one. But let's try a different one. Let's say, all right, let's do border layout. Okay, so this time I'm going to comment out the fact that I set the grid layout to be this, and just to reiterate, if you do not set a layout, the default layout is the flow layout. Like we could go look at the flow layout class, and instead of setting the layout to the flow layout, it just says, all right, if you don't tell me to set a layout, the default layout is the flow layout. But I'm going to make, we'll try a border layout. Set layout to border, new border layout. I'll control space to see if it gives me one. It doesn't. Must not let you use it for constructors. Yep, it doesn't let me use it for, so the new border layout. And we'll check out that one. What does that do? Oops, we have some spell. Is the Y there? Oh, all right. This one is going to be much more complicated. I don't even think this is going to do what we want it to do. No, just added everything to the center. All right. As soon as you add a border layout, there are 5 spots to a border layout, and you could go look at the API at the border layout. It's awesome. I have added some things in Canvas, so I'm just going to show you where those things are in Canvas, so you can check them out in Canvas as well. So in here I have this layout manager. This is in the Graphics 6 or Module 6 graphics. There's a link to some different ways of using a layout manager. So one of them is the border layout. If we go to the border layout, it'll talk about, hey, a border layout has a top area called start or page start, line underscore start. And this has changed throughout the years of Java. It used to be north, south, east, west, and center, but now it says it's here. It also explains the box layout a little bit, so it kind of shows you the border layout. If you want to learn how to use a border layout, there's links over here. So these are quick links to things, and this is how to use a border layout. We could go through this, and it talks about different constants of how to add things. So here they are adding them to certain spots. Like this is adding a button to the center. This is adding to the start, so button 3. If you notice right here, they created a new button called button 3, and then they put it, so now when you call the add method, you also put where you want to add it in the border layout. So you don't just say add, you say what spot do I want to add it to. So there's a line start constant in the border layout class. It must be static because we're using the class name to call it. It must be a constant because it's all caps. It must be public so we can use it. So the add method must be overloaded, which means we pass it a component and where we want to put it. So let's just try that real quick for one of these. I won't do all of them, but we'll try one of them. So like this very first one, this button 1, instead of just saying add button 1, since I've set the layout manager of the piece of paper to be the border layout, I can now specify where I want to put something. So we're going to put border layout again. Let me see if it gives me an autocomplete. It does not. Okay. New border layout. Dot, and I think it was line underscore start. Line underscore start. And it was a constant. Let's see if that works. It says no syntax error. So since that's the only one that I said where to put it was the button 1, the one that says click me, I'm expecting that to be at the top. All these other ones, since I said add, I think it adds it to the center, and it just keeps adding them on top of each other. So the only one we'll see is the image icon because it was the last one that was added. They just keep kind of adding on top of each other. So let's go check it out. So hopefully we get the start one at the top. We didn't. We got it over on the left. So I have some misunderstanding of what lines, oh no. Did it say line start? Yeah, line start, line end. And click me is over here on the left. It doesn't even make any sense. All right, well, here I am failing. So it is showing that there are different layout managers. Have fun with those layout managers if you want. Last thing I'm going to do, or attempt to do to you, is show you how to just get rid of all the layout managers and explicitly say the location of where you want everything. The drawback of that is if you resize the screen, it doesn't change with it, but there is a way to do that as well. I may have some issues with that, but let's give it a whirl. All right, last one I'm going to do is we've set the layout to be a grid layout. We set the layout to be a border layout. I am now going to set the layout. So my panel, oh boy, my panel, having some problems. Dot set layout, and we'll just pass null. What this does is remove any layout managers. Sorry, that's a lowercase m for the object my panel. We are setting the layout to be nothing. So now when you add something, it won't add it until you tell it where to add it. So you have to, when you create the component, you have to set its bounds. So right here, after I create the button one, I'm going to say button one dot set bounds. So there's a method called set bounds that's in the component class that allows you to put the location and the width and the height of the component itself. So if I want this to be somewhere at the bottom, I'm going to say maybe just a little bit over like 20 and way down like 200 down. So remember, top left is 0, 0, x's go across, y's go down. This is an x value, that's a y value, and then we'll set the dimensions of it to be like a 30 by 30. So what I just did is I explicitly set the bounds of the button to show up on whatever I add it to. So right now I'm adding the button, but now I have to get rid of this border layout down south because I can't use that anymore because I got rid of the layout manager. There's no more a border layout, it's just a no layout. So if there's no layout and you add something, it'll add it to where the bounds were set on the item itself. Woo! Let's give it a whirl. Hopefully this shows in the bottom left or somewhere down and to the left. We'll get one button down there, and there it is. Now we only made it a 30 by 30, so it wasn't big enough to put the word click me in there, but we did set it 20 over, 200 down, and we made it a 30 by 30 button. So we are explicitly saying where we want it and the size of it. So if you get rid of the layout manager by setting the bounds, get rid of this right here is removing any layout managers. Remember the default layout is the flow layout. And then after you create an object, you say where you want it to show up and you set the bounds on the component itself. So let's just make this a little bit bigger. We'll make this like 70 by 70. So maybe we can actually see it. And then let's just do this with the hello one too. Let's try to get this one in the bottom right corner. So we'll say button 2 dot set bounds. And we'll put this one at 200, comma 200, comma, and we'll make that one a 70 by 70 as well. But 200 over, 200 down, it should be now down there by it. And that one should say hello. Hopefully this works. We have a click me one and a hello one down at the bottom. So here's our click me one, not quite big enough yet. Here's our hello. But notice if I wanted them always to be at the bottom of the screen and I move the size of the screen, notice they're not moving this time because I have explicitly set where I wanted them to go. So that's a different way to add components to specific spots on the frame. Again, that process one more time is to set the layout of the piece of paper or whatever you're adding to be null. And then when you create the component, the next thing you do is set the bounds on the component before you actually add the component to the panel. So those 3 lines of code, this is creating the button and then setting the bounds on the button and then adding the button to the piece of paper. Those 3 lines of code kind of did that. So that's how to do layout managers, or I failed a couple times, but you got the idea of how you can research it on the API and have some fun.